I'm recording it now, so anybody do finish page 191? They do it? You're really good? You're good with it? All right, so hopefully you get it right. Let's see if you got it right. Because these are really pretty cool, and I want to make sure that we're looking at it. So there's some really interesting logic here. And you see how in this problem, let me zoom in, and in this problem, do you see how they say, one problem, I should say first, let me start. One problem a student had is they were answering the wrong question. So they were having, that was a basic problem they were having, is they're answering the wrong question. So it says complete the Punnett square on the right. Okay, so you complete it. So let's go ahead and assume you've done that. And then here you have number 4. Determine the genotype of the parents for each of the following cases. Then they say a rose, and I was actually confused because I didn't read the whole thing when I tried to help this kid answer this. It says a rose crossed with a walnut. And actually, when I first read this problem, I thought, how do you cross a rose with a walnut tree? You know, it's like a rose bush and a walnut tree. How are they going to be? That doesn't make sense to me. Of course, they're talking about a rose comb chicken and a walnut comb chicken, right? Oh. So if you have to actually look at this up here. You have to actually read, right? And so I was like, well, how do you cross it? Yeah. So even teachers make mistakes, right? And then it says the offspring, see this word offspring, you notice how I'm underlining, right? And that's why I printed your final and had you underline and write in it, and a lot of you didn't write in it at all, and it was really disappointing because you could do so much better if you use your test-taking skills. So when you're underlining, I said these are two different rows, two different chickens, right? Two different chicken types. Walnut and rose, so they're going to have two separate genotypes. And then here you have offspring. There's the word offspring, so that means what's coming next are what? Babies. They're babies. That's right. They're babies. They're the stuff. So what would go out here is the genotype of the parents, of the sperm and the eggs that the parents make, right? And what goes in these boxes are these babies. Does that make sense? So they wrote, then they say, well, look, 3/8 of these babies were walnut comb, 3/8 were rose comb, 1/8 were pea, and 1/8 single. So that makes you think when you get ratios like that, 3 out of 8, 1 out of 8, 3 to 8, right? When they get those ratios, you start thinking, at least I do, man, we got to make a Punnett square. We have to try to figure out count, or we have to multiply or something, right? No, you don't have to do any of that. You have to do none of it. All you have to know is when I'm telling you right now, that the most important part of genetics, the ones that helps you, the type of the genotype that helps you answer questions are the recessive. The recessive homozygotes are the source of most of your answers.
So that's the double lowercase, right?
Double lowercase. When we're talking about dominant recessive, right? So, okay. So you'll see what I mean in a second. So here it tells you that if it's single comb, right? And I'm going to write it off here to the side so we can zoom in. Single comb means RRPP, so it's homozygous recessive for both genes, right? A P comb, if it has a P comb, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. I'm sure to chicken breeders it does, but to us it doesn't, right? Little r, big P, underline. Why underline? What does that space mean? You don't know. It doesn't matter, right? Because you can't tell by looking at it. Once you have one single dominant, what does that dominant gene do to the other gene? Masks it. It hides it, right? There's no hiding in codominance and incomplete dominance. But when you're talking about dominant recessive, if you have a dominant gene, it masks the other gene. Some people call that a carrier. You could be a carrier for the recessive trait. Does that make sense? Because if you have one dominant trait, you can't see the other one by definition. That's why we have a blank space. So then rows is big R. Once you have a big R, it could be anything. It could be big R, little r. It's the same. It looks the same, don't they? They look the same. Then little p. And then walnut is going to be big R blank, P blank. So that could be, good luck. Then you can see here that there's only one, if you had a little r here or a big R, it's still going to be rows. And if you have big R or little r here or big P, little p here, it doesn't impact the phenotype. And you don't know in this problem, if you look carefully at the problem, if you don't know what the parent's genotype is. You don't know what the parent's genotype is. The only thing you know is that the one parent's rose, the other's walnut. That's all you know. One student that came for tutoring asked me, well, is it a male? Which one's the male and which one's the female? For this purpose of this question, it doesn't matter. So the fact that they didn't tell you doesn't impact your ability to answer the question. So it says rose crossed with walnut. So what does that mean? Let's do the cross. So when they tell you rose crossed with walnut, well, then the first thing I think you should do is write the possible genotypes for the rose and then the walnut. So the rose is going to be big R, blank, little p, and you're crossing it with the walnut, which is R unknown, P unknown. So as I try to tell you, these recessive genes here give you so much information. What is the only version of P that this parent can give? The little p, the recessive. The fact that it is a recessive gene expressed means that these two have to be these two homozygote recessives. This parent can only give a homozygous, a recessive gene for P. Bless you, a little p. That's important information. So let's look at why that's important. It says 3/8 of the children are walnut. Well, what's walnut? And by the way, they said rose, right? This is called rose. Is that right? And this is called walnut.
But then in the picture, it show you what the blanks was.
Say that again.
In the picture where it shows the different ones, it show you that is big R. I mean, it's a dominant recessive for the walnut.
That was an example, right?
Oh.
So in this example, big R, little p, big R, what, in this case, rose could be big R, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this example, it is.
Yeah.
And this one, and the P, let me see, I can't remember what the P has to be little r, but then P could be also homozygous dominant, which is what it is here. But the P comb could also be large P, little p, right?
Yeah.
So this is just an example of what they mean by a cross. Okay, so this is not the answer to this question. All right, so let's take a look at this cross again. Looking at this cross, this is what you know. So that's the first step in solving any problem that you're faced with in life, let alone in science. Are you seriously texting while I'm trying to explain this? No? Okay, just asking because it's confusing to me. All right, so when we have these two, we're crossing, this is what we know. Always write down what you know. Then ask yourself, what are they asking me? What are they asking me? I had students that came for tutoring that tried to figure out the genotype of the children. But that's not what they're asking you, right? They're asking you for the genotype of the parents. So anytime you're solving a problem, especially with these genetics problems, because they can get very confusing very quickly, even the easy ones, as you saw yesterday in your attempt to do that quiz, right? It can, especially when there's a time. Remember what we talked about in August, right? One of the things about high school and then college later and the rest of your life is that when you're taking an exam, it's not just what you know in your head. Right? It's not just what you remember. It's also what you remember as it's filtered through stress, right? As it's filtered through the time limit that you have, and the amount of reading that you have, and the complicated question that you have, right? So you have to prepare as best you can so that you can perform under those conditions. So this is why this process of writing down what you know, underlining and circling the question, and then writing down what you're looking for will help you. It will help reduce your stress. It will help reduce the errors that you make, and therefore the frustration of trying and then not getting the grade that you really wanted to get, not being as successful as you feel you want to be. All right, so rose crossed with walnut produces offspring in these, right? So these two are going to produce. Let's go ahead and draw it out. It's going to produce, somebody help me out, somebody who has it, so I don't have to keep expanding this. What I'm looking for the genotypes of the parents. What were the children? Walnut, which is what genotype? What's the genotype for walnut? Big R, blank, big P, blank. Okay, so that's one. So that's one possible outcome. What's the other one? So we got rose, which is big R, blank, little p, right? Mm-hmm. And what's the other one? Which is what?
P.
I know, but
R.
Little r.
Little r.
Blank?
Yeah.
All right, and then?
So one single.
Which is what?
R, P.
Little r?
Little r. Little p.
All right, so which of these known genotypes, right? There's some unknowns, right? We have some, this is unknown, and this is unknown, this is unknown, and this is unknown. Of course, which of these is going to give me information, is going to help me solve for these, right? So there's a kind of a something you have to remember always. Where did these children get all their genes? Where did these chicks, because these are not children, human children, they're chicks. They got them from the parents. So they had to come from one from one parent, the other from the other parent. One from one chromosome from one parent during that the parent isolated during meiosis, and the other isolated during meiosis, and it's gamete, right?
So that means a parent. So that means P parent and a rose parent.
I like how you're thinking. Let's go with that. Let's think about this.
How do they pass
So that's it. That's the question you have to ask. How did they pass this R down, this big R?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because they have it, right?
Right.
And so look, this one has a big R and this one has a big R. So either one of these parents could have gave them this, right? And this big P, where'd this one come from?
The walnut.
Only from the walnut, because the rose parent didn't have a big P to give. So that's interesting. What does the rose parent have?
The little
Now, they're not asking you for this, but you could actually determine the genotype of all the children as well, couldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Because now we know that, based on what we just said, that this previously unknown, we know it's P, don't we?
Yeah.
We know it's little p. How do we know it's little p? That's what this parent had to give. It only has a little p to give. It's all it could give. So now this big R, this parent can give a big R. This parent can give a big R. So we don't know. This doesn't help us. The fact you have a dominant gene doesn't help us figure out which is this and which is this, right? Because this could be either.
Mm-hmm.
So now, look at this one though.
Right.
2 little R's. Where did one little R come from? One of the parents. Where'd the other little one come from? The other little parent. The other parent. So what does that say to you?
That they both got a recessive.
They both have to have a recessive. See how much information you get from the recessive? You get all your information you need to solve the problem from those recessives. So you see some recessive traits, you're like, thank God. Do you see why Mendel used test cross, used homozygous recessive and called it a test cross? Because as soon as you get homozygous recessive, it gives you some information that you couldn't get otherwise. So this has to be little r, and this has to be little r, doesn't it? Not because anything else other than you had two little r's here, and this also had two little r's. So that means that those both parents had to have a little r. We know they had a dominant r, so that means they have to be heterozygous for r. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me see if I can. So that takes care of r. We're set. So we know, let's do this. Let's do the genotype because this is the answer, right? This is where I'm going to, and what I like to do when I'm solving problems, especially on standardized exams, I like to square off the answer so the grader knows where my answer is because I could have all kinds of work everywhere, right? So here's the, we know that the rose parent is going to have big R, little r. I know that, and I know the walnut parent is going to have big R, little r. So, and I'm still trying to figure out the P's. What can I do? Someone help me out. What can I do to figure out the P's? What tells me what's going on with the P's? Say that again? Well, Rose we know has two little P's, right? So that's
But we
fine.
know that one.
The last one has two. Good, good. So this has two little P's, and this has two little P's. So walnut has to have a little P.
Yep.
So that's just, I mean, that's the logic of it, isn't it? It's really logical. It really makes absolute sense. It's not like it's confusing or anything. This is not, actually, this is the opposite of confusing. It's little p. And so that means that walnut's also little, I'm sorry, not little p. It's big P, little p. And there it is. There's your genotype for the parents. Real easy. Do you agree it was easy? Assuming you took it step by step, you identified what the question was, you made sure that you used your logic and you took away the other possibilities. All right. So now let's go ahead and put these away and look at the next set of questions and see if you guys can work this out. Does somebody want to come up to the board and do this? Come up here, you can sit down here. So we have walnut. Somebody help her so she doesn't have to keep shrinking the screen down. Walnut crossed with a single. Give her the known genotype so she can write it down. And you guys help her out. You guys work it out together. I'll sit here and watch. I'll try not to comment. It's hard as a teacher not to help. Yeah. Huh?
Hold on, how did you do this one, Leslie?
So you have to.
Oh, the single.
You guys are gonna have to speak up because it's getting recorded. So. So you wrote down what you knew. What is the next step you have to write down? What they're asking you for, right? Well, you might want to write down the generation because there's something else you know, right? You're not done writing down what you know. You know something about the children, right? The chicks, the F1 generation. So go ahead and write down whatever you know about the F1 generation. So I would write it down here.
Okay.
Maybe use a different color. Choose brown.
And do what?
And just write the genotype of what that you know. You know you have walnut, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else? What's the other one? And then what else? And that's what you know, right?
Okay.
What else do you know?
That's their gene.
You know part of their genotypes, right?
Walnuts, big R, like, little R, big P, blank. Those is big R, blank, little P, and C is little R, little P,
Now, what else? Now you have pretty much everything you know, right? Written down, besides all the background information, your fundamentals, right? Because you all know what recessive and dominant is. You don't have to write that down. What is it that you have to, what's the next step that you have to write down to make sure you get it right on when you're doing a test? Right now, you're not stressed. Right now, it might be very clear in your mind, right? But on the test day, your brain's going to be stressed. So that's why we write this stuff down. What are you going to write? You wrote down what you know. What are you going to write down next? You have to write down what they're asking you for. So write down a little square, genotype of parent. You know, one is walnut, right? It's small. Nice handwriting. I've always been impressed with you. And it's single. The single you can put it down right now because they gave it to you. So single has to be this. That's a great thing about it. Recessives again, right? So I love recessive traits. They're easy. And then now you got, what's the walnut? What do you know about the walnut? You know it's big R and big P, but you don't know, you're looking for, so you can write that down, right?
Yeah.
So you know it's big R, big P, but you don't know what's next.
Well, you know.
All right, so now, help her solve the problem.
The single one.
That's someone else. I know you got it. I can tell you. You were mouthing. Anyone else? Come on, guys. Participate. Think. Be wrong now while it's safe to be wrong. Don't sit there quietly.
The walnut.
You can use this as an arrow to point. Go ahead and communicate with them.
So, what about the single one? So the walnut has two recessive, meaning one had.
Wait, the walnut or the?
I mean the single. The single had two recessives, so one had to come from each parent. So one from the single, and that means that.
Means what is it? What about this? What is that?
It would mean that the R would have to be recessive.
All right, so go ahead and write it down. So you know that's, everybody got that? So you know that the pen. So you know that has to be little R. What about the P?
That P
gotta be dominant. Because it's a dominant P over the walnut.
And in the single, there's two little things.
So that big P came from
the
walnut.
walnut.
That's right. You're right. But look here. See this big P doesn't give you a lot of information because you know it came from this, but this doesn't help you figure out what this is. But these two little P's here
Show in the rows and in the single.
yeah. Boom, you're done. Somebody want to do the next one? Good job. This is the last one on this page. So this is the kind of logic you're going to have to use.
Oh, I should bring.
No, go ahead. Lend her your packet. So, and people help her out. What are we crossing here?
Yeah, bro.
It was a big R, little R, little P. That's one parent, and then the other one was big R, little R, big P, little
Hold on.
P.
Oh, there's something else.
Yeah, that was the parents' genotype.
So go ahead, give her that information again.
For rows.
So you cross on the rows with a P.
Big R.
And then the P is little r, big P, blank.
So what are the walnuts?
The big
Wait, what?
Hold on. You don't really need to know if they're a walnut or not, right? So just give her the genotype for the 4.
And what was the other one?
Good. Is that it?
Yeah.
There's only 2 kinds of kids here?
I mean,
Because
but it's like
chicks.
6 of them and 5 of them.
All right. Well, we have to figure it out. Let's look at it.
So for the P, the rows, it got 2 P's. So one had to come from the rows, and then the other one came from the P. So the
Join
P,
The P,
it's a recessive.
so you know the P is recessive, right? Because of that. That's right.
Since
That little, what's that other, that chicken, the Rose. The Rose got a little R too, and he got a little.
This one?
Wait, who has a little R?
The Rose, the next chicken. That P came from, that P got a little R. That P passed down to that Rose chicken.
huh? Where you get the little R?
How do you read?
Oh,
And I'm right.
Okay, so I don't understand why you think, what evidence do you have that that's a little R?
because it got the walnut got the dominant R from the rows.
So what you're, okay, so this is great. What you're hearing here is that you guys are solving for this. You're telling me that this is definitely a little R. I agree, put a little R right there. That's fine. That's definitely a little R because this parent only has the ability to give a little R, right? Because this parent can only give a little R, this is definitely a little R, and so is this one, right? So you could definitely answer that, but that's not, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is not the question you're being asked. The question you're being asked was the genotype of the parent, which is not, you don't know that it's little r based on this information, right? All you know is that the children have little r's. This parent we know that this parent, the Rose parent, definitely gave the big R to both sets of children. So 100% of the genes coming from this parent are what?
Big R.
Big R. So there's no definitive evidence to say one way or the other that you have a little r. But if you were forced to make a choice, what choice would you make? You think it's a little r. Why would you think it's a little r? What evidence? The only evidence I see is that it has a big R. The only evidence I see is that it could. Now the reason is this. Here's my reasoning. This parent, this Rose parent, gave. Oh, let me rephrase that. 100% of its children, its chicks, got a big R from it. Does that make sense? So 100% of its chicks got a big R from it. There were no chicks that got a little R. So now there were only 16 chicks. So the odds are
not, there could be a little r in there, right? So you can't say definitively one way or the other, but you could say it's likely that this parent is big R, big R. Likely. It's not as definitive as when we had the little r's, right? When we had the recessive trait, because the problem is that the dominant allele can hide the recessive allele. The fact that these are both dominant, they can hide the recessive allele, and therefore there could be a little r in there hidden. But it's likely it's a big R because 100% of the chicks of its children, all right, of its progeny, had the big R. So you could argue it's likely that it's big R, but we can't really tell.
I mean, either way, the dominant will still show.
The dominant will show, but the question is, do we know what the genotype of the parent is? We can't really tell. Now, what would we do? What could we do to make sure that, or to see if this was recessive or dominant? We could cross it a couple hundred more times and see if there's any of the chicks turn out to be recessive. If any of the chicks turn out to be recessive, little r, then we're pretty sure, right? I mean, we'll be sure that there is a little r. Right, but all of them have what? All of them got what from this parent?
Big R.
A big R. All of them got a big R from this parent. And remember what I asked you in the beginning of this lesson? I asked you this. It was yesterday. I think it was earlier yesterday. I asked you this. Is it possible that I could flip a coin 10 times and get heads every time?
Yes.
Yeah. Can I do it 20 times? Sure. It could happen. Is it likely? No. But so here, there's a 50-50 shot, right? Either big R or whatever this is, right? So the odds are that after 16 chicks, this one got assorted into it, right? So this is probably a big R. But could it be that this is the only gene that keeps getting put into the chicks? Could these be all the sperm that impregnated those eggs ended up being this gene? Is that possible? Sure, it's possible. Is it likely? No, but it's possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's just like flipping a coin 16 times and getting 16 heads in a row. Is that possible? Sure. Is it possible that you never gave this gene on this chromosome, whatever chromosome that is, to your chicks? Sure, that's possible. That's why you would, if you were going to solve this problem, you'd have to cross this chicken another couple hundred times, make a couple hundred more chicks. If you ever got a recessive, then you know that there's a recessive gene here. But if you always get dominant, you assume it's dominant. This is what we call true breeding. True breeding, write it down, because you'll see that. Thank you. Well, you would write something, if you were forced to give an answer, you would write something like this, right? And you'd say, it's probably all right, say that again. Well, what about them? If you would have separated them and then do what with them? I'm not sure. Oh, yeah. You can go back and yeah. You could do that. What you could do is you can do that, and that's another thing that, like Mendel did. You can back cross, and you take these chicks that you have, and you can take the rose-colored ones and the rose comb, and you can recombine them, send them loose. But see, the thing is that you already know their genotype. You don't need to do that. You know what their genotype is. You know they're big R, little p. You know that. We already figured that out, right?
So it's not, you don't need to know the chick's genotypes, you need to know this genotype here, and there's no 100% way of doing it without doing a lot more crosses. Remember yesterday I told you that Mendel, the reason that Mendel's numbers worked out so well is because he had thousands of P's,
Yeah.
thousands of F1 generations.
Anybody help him? Like, he was psyched.
He sat there, I don't know if he had help or not, but remember, he's a monk, so monks, they have a lot of time on, not a lot of time, but they pray, right? And they contemplate God, they do work, right? Whatever work that is, and his job, I can't remember what he did. I mean, he's probably a biology teacher, some school, right? And and for sure he was sounded like he was in charge of gardening at the monastery. So that was his job. But instead of just isolating the peas and going about his business, he isolated peas and then started thinking about why did these peas turn out this way and what is it that's controlling this. So anyways, it was very lucky that Mendel did these thousands of crosses, had thousands of F1 generations, because then it's very unlikely that you would ever not be able to tell what this gene was. If you had thousands of chicks, and those thousands of chicks were all rose, or what's the other one? P or rose, and you never got little r, right? Then you're pretty sure that this is a big R, right? You're pretty sure this is dominant. It's highly unlikely that you would create 1,000 chicks and none of them be recessive trait if you have the recessive gene. Am I making sense to you? All right, so these kinds of problems, expect a lot of them. This is the kind of problem that is challenging, but it really does test whether you understand these concepts. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, some of you guys are having trouble with this one, and so let's quickly take a look at it. I think it's pretty straightforward. So they have this bacterial virus. This is the genome for this virus. So this is all the genetic information inside a virus. Now, a virus is very tiny. It doesn't have as much information as you would have, right? Because it doesn't have to have eyes and brains and et cetera, et cetera. It only has a tiny little particle, little proteins, and it might have some other structures, but you can see that the genome is fairly small. This is a bacterial virus. We call it a phage. Phage. A phage is just a virus that attacks bacteria. Now, it starts here and ends here. This is the whole genome for this virus. But the genome is different from the gene, right? Remember, the genome just means all the DNA in the daggone thing, right? So you have a human genome. The human genome is all the DNA sequence in all your chromosomes. Right? It's a lot, 3 billion plus, right? Here in this bacterial virus, this is the entire genome for this bacteria. But within this genome, we find what? Genes. There are genes within this genome. And what does a gene do? What is a gene? When we say big A, little a, what's a gene? Those are genes, right? Two different versions of the same gene. What do these genes do?
Determine your phenotype.
They do determine your phenotype, that's right. But how? What do they actually do? You know this by now. If you don't, you're in trouble. What do genes do?
They do. This
Okay.
like the way you saying it is.
It's confusing.
Yeah,
It
but
shouldn't
it's really
be.
not.
It really isn't, and it shouldn't be. Do what? They make what? Genes make proteins.
Oh, someone said that.
I didn't hear it. Proteins determine phenotype.
Oh, it's not genes. It's protein.
So genes make the protein, right? It's a central dogma of molecular biology, right? The central base rule. One gene, one protein, right? So genes make proteins.
The proteins that do functions. There might be an enzyme, it might be melanin in your skin, it might be the color of your skin, your hair, your eyes. It could be the texture of your skin, the texture, you get an armadillo with one gene, you get nails on a finger and with another gene, right? So both are hard, scaly, right? But they're different. Do you agree? Two different genes. So this start, every gene, as you know, has a start, and there's a start, and of course the gene ends here. So explain what is meant by the genome of an organism. Well, that's all the DNA in an organism, right? All the genetic information in the organism. So that's it. I don't know if I like them calling a virus an organism, because it's not an organism.
I said for number one, I said the complete set of DNA.
That's right, the complete set of DNA in an organism. The complete set of genetic information in an organism. That's it.
What's the rest of them? So what's the rest of them?
Well, this is one gene here. There is probably more than one gene in a genome.
So why the other things?
They're only looking at one because that's the set of questions that they're asking about it. Determine the number of bases, kilobases, and megabases in this genome, 100 bases in each row except for the last one. So it's real simple. There's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. I wouldn't even start there. I'd go 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500, right? 1,500 so far, plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. here, right? I'm not going to waste my class time counting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then you go ahead and you would add these 5 plus 5. Add them together, and that's the total. Did anybody do that? No one's done that. That's the total number of bases. So these are bases.
Oh. That's what I did.
What do you mean? How do I need to know that? They told me that there's 100 bases in each row, except the last. Look at these rows. What is each base? A letter. You know what bases are. We've learned it. Do not lay your head down and go to sleep in this class. Tap her on the shoulder. Dear, I'd like to see you after class, please. Huh? 1,544. 1,544. Bases. Bases. Yeah. Yeah, you can't lay your head down and go to sleep after texting and then think I'm not going to say something. We can talk. I'll listen to what you have to say, but right now I don't like you going to sleep in the class right after you get done texting a little earlier. It's very distracting behavior. All right, so 1,544 bases, right? All right, so how many kilobases? So this is what I'm going to tell you to do when you're converting. It's really easy. You should have learned it already in middle school. I know a lot of people have it, but it should be straightforward. You put down on this end of the equal sign what you want. Kilobases is the first one I want, right? So we know for A, the answer for A is 1,544 bases. I put down on this side kilobases because that's what I want. This is the next, this is B, it's asking for kilobases. Then I put down over here on the far left what I have, 1,544 bases. It's like any problem you're going to solve. What is it that you have and what is it that you're being asked for, right? Always write down what you know and then what you're being asked for. So how do we convert bases to kilobases? You're always going to multiply times some kind of conversion factor. That's it. So you put them both, this one you put over 1, because any number you can put over 1, right? That's allowed in math. Then at the bottom, you want to get rid of bases, right? Because you don't see the word bases over here, right?
Yes.
So you get rid of bases. How do we get rid of it? You have to cancel. So
bases. And what do we want? We put what we want on top.
No.
Kilobases.
Yeah, the kilobase. Oh, you didn't.
So then, how many bases in a kilobase? Well, they tell us this. They tell us this right here. 1,000 bases in 1 kilobase. It's not really that hard, is it? And then the next step, of course, is that I want to cancel. So bases are canceling. Do you see that? And then I'm dividing by 1,000. Now, a lot of you are going to need a calculator for this. You really don't need it. If you're dividing by 1,000, all you do when you're dividing by whole factors of 10, all you're going to do is move the decimals for every zero that you have. So if you're dividing, you move the decimal 3 times, right, because there's 3 zeros, to the left. So it's 1.544 kilobytes. Kilobases, sorry. So does that make sense, right? I mean, that's, if you're multiplying times 1,000, then you move the decimal in the opposite direction. That's the great thing about the metric system and about using base 10. You can just move decimals around without having to do any real thoughtful math. Not that I don't like doing thoughtful math, it's just it makes things faster. So that would be how you solve for kilobases. Then megabases, I do the same thing. On this side, I'm going to put what? Megabase, MB. On this side, you put what? What you have. And what do you have? You have 1 megabase equals 1,000,000 bases. So how many bases did we have? 1,544 bases, because that's what I have, over 1. I know I'm going to multiply to some kind of conversion factor. What do I want to get rid of? I want to get rid of bases. What do I want to what do I want? I want megabase. How many megabases? 1,000,000 bases in, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In 1 megabase. So I'm going to move the decimal how many times? 6 times. So 0.00154 megabases. Do you agree?
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's right.
So this is what you knew about. You knew that megabase.
I don't need to know that. Why don't I need to know it? It tells you everything right there. You should know meg is 1,000,000 and kilo is 1,000. You should know that. But they'll usually give you some hints.
But Mendoza, there's a decimal point, so why did you do it from behind 4? No.
What?
You start with 1,500.
So you started with 1,544 bases,
No,
right?
we changing the kilo bases to megabases. No, we're taking bases to megabases.
It makes it easier for me. I could show you how to go from kilobases to megabase if you want, but I'd have to talk about conversion factors and I have to tell you how many kilobases are in a megabase. It's easier to go with what they've given you in the problem. They gave it to you in megabases and bases, so just stick with that. They already gave you the conversion factor. Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. The rest I think you can answer. I think this was probably the thing that messed most of you up.